feminism has conditioned black women to view black men as the enemy.
It has. Feminism was financed by the CIA. Gloria, what was her name? Gloria Steinem, I think she was.
Right, yeah.
Mother of modern feminism, because traditional feminism goes back to the 1800s, right? With Susan B. Anthony and those white supremacists. But Gloria Steinem was a CIA agent. They financed her. Her first feminist magazine they paid for. The CIA brought feminism into the white household to get the woman out the house, and into the black household to turn the black woman against the black man. To scapegoat us for problems caused for her by white supremacy.
So, obviously, a big thing, obviously, we spoke about the gender wars, earlier. Obviously, there's a lot of conversation nowadays about, the value of what a woman brings and the value of what a man brings in a relationship. And now there's a lot more rhetoric from our women that we hear is, I'm strong, independent, I don't need no man, right? So,
that's pain speaking, though.
Right.
Because most black women know they will never get a man. A black woman can have sex whenever she wants.
Right.
Because she's beautiful. She can have a bed mate, but to have a soul mate, she may never get. I have two daughters, 11 and 20, right? My oldest will be 21 this week. Statistically, right? There's a strong chance my daughter could be one of those. I hope she's not. She could be one of those who never get a husband, because only 1 out of 4 gets a husband. You see that? So when a black woman says, I don't need a man, that is a reaction to the reality that I may not get a man.
So why not preach? Because I understood, you're obviously against interracial relations when it comes to black men with black women. With white women.
With all women. You should only be with the black woman.
And you will say, well, if you can't find a good woman in America, there's
somewhere else.
In Africa.
Absolutely.
So why not teach that same rhetoric to our women? Like, if you feel
I tell sisters all the time, go to Africa. So I know sisters who marry. I just spoke with her sister. She invited me to the wedding. She just married a brother from the continent.
So, but instead of saying they will never get married,
I'll take sisters to Africa who married brothers they met in Africa.
Right.
So yeah,
I think there's plenty. I think there's obviously plenty of black men
and
black women. So
and what I also tell black women, if
you're
going to go get you an African man from the continent,
right,
you're going to have to understand that the way in which you talk to black men in America will not be tolerated over there.
Why the fuck is it tolerated? It's not tolerated here. That's what we're trying to tell them.
Well, over here, I want to say this to us, though. Because we try to act like the way sisters treat us doesn't have a history that we are not at least partly responsible for. Let's be honest. The black woman has had to hold down the black house by herself, although imperfectly. She's had to do it by herself since the mass incarceration of black males began in the 1970s. You understand me? Most of our children are raised by a single mother right now. And it has been that way for about 50 years. So when a sister says, I don't need a man, because she couldn't find one strong enough to hold her down. Or when you meet a woman and you say, sister, I'm strong enough to be your man. You ain't got to work or you ain't got to pay the bills or whatever. Pull back. I got you. And she can't do it because all the other men before you who disappointed her. So what I'm saying is, black men, we got to be patient with our women because we created that personality. We created that. And then we want to act like we didn't play a role.
We have to be held accountable for their poor selection.
No, you have to be held accountable. No, you have to be held accountable because they have a poor selection. See, what you're saying, you're selecting a poor mate. And what I'm saying is they don't have much to select one, so of course you're going to end up with a poor mate. And why is she going to end up with a poor mate? Because we as black men are not raising black boys to be the men that our women need. We are not. They out there killing themselves right now. What we doing about it? Unemployed black males, what we doing about it? Pants sagging, weed smoking, what we doing about it? Black men are not raising black boys to be the men our community needs. That is 100% our fault. What I'm saying is she got a right to be angry with us. She got a right to be angry with us.
I understand
we have not been on our job as black men. If the men are the providers, what have we been providing for our community? I'm not speaking you individually.
Yes.
Because you may be a damn good father. You may be a damn good father. You may be a damn good father. But guess what? What are we doing for the community? What are we doing for the children who don't have a father? You don't think the black woman got a right to be angry when she's been raising 2/3 of the kids by herself for 50 years? And the minute she raised her voice, we say she's not humble enough? She had to become masculine to survive the rape, the molestation, the domestic abuse. Are you telling me you can't see how we created that?
I understand that, but she needs to be
If we was loving our women and taking care of our women, do you think she would be like that? That personality has a history.
If she's picking Pookie and Ray Ray instead of
you're making her a scapegoat.
No, she's picking a scapegoat.
No.
There's good quality men that they ignore.
Why she even got it? Why is there even a Pookie in the selection?
You gotta ask her that.
No. I'm gonna tell you why there's a Pookie in the selection.
Wow.
Because black men have abandoned black boys and have allowed social media, white media, athletes, and rappers to raise them. That's why she with Pookie. If we never allow Pookie to develop, she would not have a Pookie. If we're going to be men, the first thing we got to do is take responsibility for why our women feel the way they feel.
I can hear that.
I'm not saying that they're right to disrespect, because even if a woman disrespects me, right, that still don't give me a right to disrespect her, because she's still the queen of the community. Even if she's not acting like it, I'm going to give her that respect. But when I hear brothers talk like this discourse we having now, we act like we don't understand.
No,
there's reasons for that shit.
I do understand. Women are so valuable. You get what I'm saying? Like, I think women ground men and help them, propel to the next level. I think men get further in life with a woman, right? But if I'm a hardworking man, but I'm only looked at as resources, and then she's ready to jump on Tom, Dick, and Harry because he got flash, he's shining a little bit more, his access to money is quicker than mine. It's kind of hard to have that.
Well, no, one, I agree with you, but that's not all sisters.
No, it's not.
If you're constantly running into that type of woman, then the problem is you, because you're attracting a certain low vibrational energy. Why
not have that same energy for women? You just again, you have the man responsible. Because we having a
conversation as men.
Yeah,
I got plenty of interviews with all women where I check them too.
Right.
But as a man, you should not be concerned about what I say to them. No, as men, we should be concerned of what we're going to do to produce a better generation of black males for tomorrow. That's the only, that is where we should be focused.
Women bring the choice of life, right? We understand that, right? I can't have a child unless a woman agrees.
And she can't carry one if you didn't put it in her.
I agree with that 100% too, right? But whether or not, if you want that child or not, she can still make that decision. It's only up to her.
If you don't put a seed in her, nothing else happens. And no woman can make you put a seed in her. So the original act was the responsibility of a man.
True. I mean,
all right. So did black men willingly leave the household, or was it the system that was?
It was systemic.
All right. So how, if we giving them grace for them having to do it without us, but it wasn't our fault, how are we not getting that same grace and that same respect?
I'm gonna tell you why.
Why?
I'm gonna tell you why. Because black men, as the leaders of the community, now
we can't be leaders.
Here's the question we got to make. Here's the question. Because the argument y'all make, feeds into the feminist agenda.
Okay.
It's an argument that says, I don't want the responsibility.
I'm a leader.
I don't want to fix shit. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to fall back and let her run everything. That's what the feminists tell. They say, look at them, making excuses for why they can't be better men, making excuses for why they can't make better men. You understand? Your argument feeds the feminist narrative.
That's not what we're making excuses for.
I'm saying I am the better man, but I shouldn't be held responsible because you wanted to choose a Pookie and a Ray Ray. That's not me. I worked too hard in my life.
I'm going to go back to what I said. Pookie and Ray Ray shouldn't exist. And the only reason why Pookie and Ray Ray exist because we're not in the community making those boys the men they need to be.
What's up, family? You already know what it is. Breakdown Friday, Joseph Ward, Super Patrick, Professor Carl Tone Jones. We are here breaking down the interview with Dr. Umar Johnson on the Daily Wrap-Up Crew podcast. And they had a very interesting conversation. It was a long conversation. So you just saw a clip of the part 2. It was 2 parts. So that was a clip of part 2, where the interview went more into the conflict of the relationship between the black men and the black women. You know, we've talked about that extensively on this channel. A lot of the topics that were talked about throughout the full interview, we have talked about on this channel, but this is the part of the interview that pretty much set the internet on fire. I know when I first saw the pairing of Dr. Umar with the Daily Wrap-Up Crew, I'm not even gonna lie. My first first thought was like, oh man, it's not a good matchup. This is not a good matchup. Um, I haven't extensively watched their podcast, but I watched enough of the clips and shorts of the podcast to see how they move. And I have watched shows. So I understand how they get down, and I also understand how Umar get down. So I was like, oh, this not gonna be a good pairing. Because I was thinking, especially if they get into the interview, to the relationship thing that was gonna get washed, and. But some of the things that set the internet on fire were the responses that Umar was giving to a lot of their questions. And we're going to break those things down. We're going to break those things down because we want to make sure that we are a part of the true repairing of the black family, of black men and black women. Hey, black women, we need each other. We need you. All right. So we want to make sure we are part of fixing the issue. That's why we want to break these things down. So start with you, PC. Overall, what are just your overall thoughts about the interview and the pairing between Umar and the Daily Wrap Up crew, especially the clip that we saw.
Well, I thought uh, similar to you. I thought that they would be overmatched because when you talk to a person with the personality as big as Umar, one of the things you have to do is you have to be able to match his energy, or at least counter it. And there were times where I felt like he was sunning those young brothers during the interview. And when somebody, and first of all, let me just say this. I don't think there's ever a time where you should be talking over somebody when they're countering the point of yours. I just don't. I think it's unprofessional, it's uncouth, and basically, we have a word for that in Philly. We used to, when we grew up with it, it's called sounding on somebody. And when you sounding on somebody, it's basically saying that I'm gonna be bigger and tougher than you, so it don't matter what you say. I mean, Chris Rock used to have a joke that said, "Can you beat my ass?" So we're gonna, and that's kind of the energy that was presented in the interview. And I felt like those brothers, just verbatim, like verbally speaking, they had some good points to counter. They had some good points to counter, and I thought that Umar was able to utilize his guile, his experience in being in these arenas to navigate the conversation so that anytime they box him into a corner, he can move the goalpost. And I felt the goalpost got moved a lot on this conversation. And I thought that, and I always say this, it's disrespectful to pander to anybody you care about. And I felt like the interview was about pandering to the emotions of black women without dealing with how dangerous it is to deal with the consequences that come from that type of pandering and the position it puts black women in. Because you're telling black women basically they're not responsible for the decisions they make. They're not responsible for the predicaments they find themselves in. What you're basically telling them is that they have the accountability of children. And if they have the accountability of children, then you don't listen to children when it comes to running a house. You don't listen to children when it comes to running a community. You don't take direction from children when it comes to running a nation. In other words, children are to be seen and not heard in a lot of cases. So you're basically telling women they're to be seen and not heard. We're going to put you up on this pedestal. We're going to cater to you. We're going to give you everything, but you don't have any say so in how that acts. I feel like that's very disrespectful to black women.
All right.
And Pat, disingenuous to black men.
Right. Pat, it's your first time seeing this clip. What are your thoughts?
I think we might have should have clipped that up and taken it point by point.
I was writing stuff down.
Because I was trying to write, but it was so much going on, I couldn't keep up with my own thoughts.
I was writing.
I agree with what PC said. I thought I wouldn't even say he used his guile and his skill. He used his status. in their deference to not allow them to speak. He kept talking over them, knowing and understanding that they were going to back down, probably because in the pre-show conversations they were backing down.
Mm.
And so I think when the cameras turned on, it was just a continuation. He probably allowed he probably set himself up as the elder before the show even started, and then when the show started, instead of playing the role of the elder, he played the role of the bully. Because he didn't let them say nothing. And if you tune him out and just listen to what they were trying to say, they were actually countering all of his points very well. They
They
just
just
weren't
couldn't follow
allowed.
up on it.
Yeah, and he was not following up on it. And I think Umar's not a dummy. The man is intelligent. He understood that he didn't want the conversation that they were trying to have. Because that conversation wouldn't have been beneficial to any of his talking points. So, but I do think that's a necessary conversation. But it was a frustrating uh interview. I like you, Joe. When y'all first told me about it, I was like, that don't even make sense. Like, where's their elder, their mentor, there's somebody, big bro, somebody to pull them to the side and be like, yo, why are y'all bringing this dude on here?
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is not one. His audience is not going to like you. Period. That's that. So there's no cross pollination happening here. Um, and two, your audience is not going to like him. So not only are you not going to gain viewers by having Umar on your platform, because of the nature of your platform, you're going to potentially lose viewers by having Umar on your platform. If he suns you bad enough, or if it goes in a way that is not to your favor, there's literally no upside for any black manosphere / red pill content creator to have Umar Johnson on their channel. There's no upside to it.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
not even getting into his points, just getting into the fact that in this particular situation, there isn't even any benefit to having him on, and then he gets on and he does what he did. He doesn't impart wisdom. It doesn't sound like it was a constructive dialogue. It doesn't sound like there were any solutions presented. He did a lot of chastising black men without doing any real at least in that clip, any real analysis of the causation of the problem, except to admit that it is systemic. But then to double back and say, but even though it's systemic, tough shit. Um, like it's like what does anybody get out of that outside of either feeling good if you are a woman that agrees with that, or being annoyed if you're a man or a woman that understands that you're a grown ass adult. Like, what does this interview do to progress the cause? And that goes back into the conversation about leadership that we're gonna get into later and a bunch of other things. So my first impression is even worse than what I thought it was. That whole segment, you know, um, I flushed something down the toilet earlier this morning that had more value than that.
Hey, so building off what I said earlier, when I saw the pairing, I was like, my first thought was like, I don't want to watch this. I don't want to watch this. Um, I didn't think he should be on there because they were not prepared for him. They're not studied enough, not confident enough, and because even if they were studied enough, the way they presented themselves in this, it wasn't confident enough to stand on their points. To like, if you felt like he was wrong, or if you did your research and he said something and you knew that it didn't line up with what you researched, even if when you go back and do your research, you double back on the research, even if you are wrong, you still need to be confident in what you're saying. just as confident as he was, and the levels of confidence were off. It was a bad look. I think overall this interview was a bad look, and it like you said, like both of you said, it didn't help to bring black men and black women together. This is something else that has black men and black women arguing again. Neely Fuller talks about leaders being able to solve problems without creating problems. And I don't think this lined up with that. It wasn't, like you said, Pat, it wasn't constructive, because I think it caused more problems than it solved. So people who didn't agree with Umar, they don't agree with Umar. People who agree with Umar, they agree with Umar. Now, I think the difference in this time is we're seeing pushback from men and women against Umar. Because I've seen several videos on the internet of women basically not agreeing with him and not appreciating the way he was describing black women, as far as saying they shouldn't be held accountable for their actions. And I've seen well, I haven't watched all of them, but I watched one live stream, and I've seen videos and things on Twitter of women giving their pushback on this interview. I do think it was an opportunity to teach that was lost. And it's, once again, it's something that's causing more friction than it should, and it shouldn't cause that much friction. So let's get into this. Leaders versus followers, black leadership, black men being leaders. All right. So Pat, start with you. Before we get into black men as leaders, let's just talk about leadership, period. And from what you've learned, what you've studied in your experience, how would you describe leadership?
Leadership is a pact between groups of people. To simplify it, there is an exchange of power happening. And I'm trying to simplify it because I used to teach a leadership course. And leadership is so much more than what people say. Mm-hmm. It's really all about an exchange of power and influence. And it is not the leader that has those things. All of those things are transferred to the leader from the followers. A leader gets his power, his influence, his ability to create change from all of the people that choose to follow that leader. Everybody is born, if you want, with an inherent ability to influence the world. And what happens when a bunch of people aggregate that ability to influence the world is that they gain the ability as a group to create monumental changes in the way the world operates. Usually the way that group does that is by instilling all of their small bits of power and influence into one person. That one person becomes a leader. The leader is beholden to that group. Meaning now we're talking about the responsibilities of followers. Followership is something that not a lot of people talk about, not enough people talk about, even though everybody want to talk about leadership. If you ain't talking about followership, you ain't really talking about leadership, because a wise quote, I can't remember where I heard it from. A leader with no followers is a crazy person talking to themselves. If there's nobody following you, you're not a leader. Mm-hmm. And you can't force people to follow you. Mm-hmm. People have to make a choice to follow you. So you can do things to influence and manipulate that choice, but at the end of the day, they have to make a decision to lend you their power, their resources, and their influence in order for you to become a leader. So if we're talking about it from a communal standpoint, in terms of black men being the leaders, that's not something black men can claim. Leadership is not a title you can take. It's a title that has to be given to you.
Earned.
Earned. You say earned, but at the end of the day, yes, it is earned. It should be earned. But we understand in a dysfunctional community, you can still have leaders because at the end of the day, you want a leader to earn it, but it is something that's given. You give leadership. What has Umar done for black people all over the nation? And this is no shot. This is a genuine question. Where black people all over the nation can say he has earned the mantle of leadership above every other black person. The answer is nothing. He was given that mantle. And again, that's not a shot to him. That's just making sure that we understand exactly how leadership works. It's something that's given to an individual by other groups of individuals. You can stand up front and say, I'm a leader all you want. If the group says, fuck out of here, guess what? So,
Not the leader.
right. So, that's one of the things about this dynamic between black men and black women that we really gotta hone in on because it's a power struggle.
Mm-hmm.
If neither side is going to agree that the other side is the leader, then there will never be a leader. And in that situation, we gotta come up with a new way of being. Can we be co-leaders? Can we be something else that doesn't involve leadership? What else can we do? But at the end of the day, if we're going to hone in, and I'm going to shut up with this one, if we're going to hone in on saying we need men to lead, if that's the decision the community is going to make, then women have to give that authority over to men. If men are going to say women are going to lead, then men have to give that authority over to women. Neither side can claim the title of leadership, and that's why the shit ain't working.
There it is. So, PC, take us further in and give us a further breakdown, rather, on followers and why followers are important to leadership in the team.
Well, leaders need permission. They need permission to lead. That authority is granted by those who identify as followers. So if you and I are on both sides of a schoolyard and we both have our soapbox and we're talking, whomever the people gather around, whoever the people choose to follow, that is who becomes the leader. But the people have to choose to follow. And what we've been dealing within the black community is people saying, "Listen, we want black men to be leaders, but we're going to also be creating chaos, and we're going to be calling for mutiny on this ship of leadership." And that's something that we have to be really honest about, because what we're seeing right now, we're not really looking for leaders. People want to do things their own way. They don't want any rules, regulations. They reject culture in our community. And because when you have culture, you have more ways and folkways that will determine leadership, because your culture will determine how leadership is granted, and it will determine the responsibility of those who support the leadership. But what we have is basically we want scapegoats for when things go wrong. If the black community was thriving right now, nobody would be asking for a leader. When you look at other communities who are making progress, you don't hear them complaining about who's going to lead us, because those communities have culture. Those communities already understand the roles of both men and women and children in those communities. They understand the roles of elders. They understand the roles of their spiritual leaders, religious leaders, and so forth and so on. We don't have that. What we have is a bunch of chaos and confusion, and we're trying to create order out of the chaos, but some of us benefit and get perks from the chaos. Therefore, we don't want the solution, because we're going to have to give away some of those perks. If we're going to be honest about this conversation today. And, when you look at some of the things that were said in that interview, about the responsibility of fixing it, I agree that men as leaders should be at the helm of fixing what's wrong. Black men do need to learn how to work together to fix and create solutions for what's happening systemically. We need to create systems of power, but it don't come from, preaching. It comes from action. It comes from words. It comes from building networks. It comes from consolidating and also putting our fragile egos to the side so that we can actually listen to another man. You know, so when, and I can talk on this for hours because this is something we actually do off the camera in regards to generating leadership, going out in the community and working with those same populations that we were just talking about. I think that you have to actually look at it from a perspective of not wanting to be billed as the leader, but just do the things that leaders do. And if you do the work that leaders do, then you don't have to worry about, how you'll be perceived because history is going to judge you based on your work, not your words.
So I think about the team. What is the team? So the team consists of leaders, followers, and everybody else in the mix that makes the team happen. I use a football analogy. At the end of the year, if the team goes 3-13, yes, the head coach at the end of the day, the head coach gets the blame as the leader. Yes. But also, if my quarterback threw 22 interceptions, he might not come back as my quarterback. And the head coach might not come back, and the quarterback might not come back because there are consequences to not performing. So same thing in life and relationships and community and stuff. Okay. Black men who claim leadership, or black men who are given leadership. Like both of you have expressed, a leader is nothing without followers. But everybody on the team has a role, and everybody's role is important, and everybody's role is either going to contribute to the team winning or the team losing. But everybody has a role to play, and everybody's role may not hold the same weight. Some people's roles may be more important than others. Some people's roles may be more glamorous than others. Glamour doesn't necessarily equate to importance, but everybody has a role to play. And if you don't play your role, you contribute in the failing of the team. In this instance, if you don't play your role, you're going to contribute in the failing of the community. Is the head coach, the head coach or whoever the quarterback gets all the blame, gets all the glory when you win and gets all the blame when you lose. But if the offensive line don't block, the defensive line don't get penetration, the cornerbacks don't cover. Once again, everybody has a role to play. And I think if the thought process is only the leaders have a role to play, that's a losing mentality from the beginning. That's not even realistic. That's not even realistic for a community to have a thought process of, I am not responsible for my actions, or I am not responsible for the role that I play on this team to help this team win. If Black America is serious about getting better, both men and women have to be realistic and serious about being our best selves, like in the Monday videos when you're reading the compensatory code. Everybody has to be serious about becoming a better version of themselves. Universal man and universal woman. That's what we talk about in the compensatory code. Universal man and universal woman. It doesn't just say universal man and universal woman. So yes, the leaders take the bulk of the blame, but everybody has a role to play in whether the team wins or lose. And that's what I'm gonna say on that.
Well, hold on, Joe, because I want to run something about it because you bring up a good point about people in the roles that we play. And here's something that nobody wants to talk about, because the we talk about the steps that our sisters have made professionally, career wise, collegiate wise. We talk about the fact that they're earning higher salaries than any other time in the history of this country, which is true. And I don't have a problem with any of that. The only issue I have with that is, where is your investment into the community? Where because it can't be, well, we're doing all this, we're just waiting on the men to get together, because the women are the first teachers of the children. And I think about that because I think about two instances in the history of America that's non-black, but when you were dealing with a defeated group of men, and their women helped turn the tide and help make them not just productive, but invested in them so much that those men became institutionalized. The investment into those men became institutionalized, which was groundbreaking to the building of their parts, their segments of society. Now, I'm talking about the post-Civil War, in both cases, the post-Civil War Confederacy, right? Because they still considered themselves the Southern states and the Midwest states that fought the Civil War. They still considered themselves at war when the Emancipation Proclamation was passed, when the end of the Civil War was declared, when the surrender of the South was by Jefferson Davis and all those other folks down there, when they all declared it. You had the creation of the United Daughters of the Confederacy. These women went out, and instead of saying, listen, we got all of this reparation money, we're going to ball out of control, we're going to we want to live a life of luxury and leisure, those women reinvested into institutions to build up their boys, so that their boys would be men strong enough to stand face to face, toe to toe with the men that defeated the previous generation. They built monuments, they built schools, they wrote books, they created libraries, they created financial programs in place. And as a matter of fact, the United Daughters of the Confederacy still are in existence today, right? And they did so because they knew that the only way that they could restore valor to the fallen South was to restore the honor and integrity and the dignity of their men. And they did that because they understood the power of image. They didn't trash their men. They didn't talk about their men being deadbeats. They didn't talk about their men being no good, what's, this, that, and the other. And that's not all black women, but we don't have enough black women countering the black women that say these things about black men, if we're going to have an honest conversation. I also have one story about a family that we know very well throughout history, and that's the James boys, Jesse and Frank James. Anybody know their story, we know that they grew up in the home of a single mother, but she didn't raise their boys to be reliant. She didn't raise those boys to be soft. She raised those boys to be warriors. And then when people look at them as, historically speaking, as outlaws and things of that nature, they considered themselves soldiers, rebel soldiers, fighting against the Union forces. So when they would rob a train, they would rob Union trains. When they would rob banks, they would rob Union banks and things of that nature. She raised them to be warriors. And so as a woman, she was able to instill manhood in those boys. When we talk about the choices, because Umar in that clip, he talks about women, a little further on that clip, black women not having no choices but Pookie and Ray Rays, which I hate that terminology, but it works for what we're talking about here. 80% of brothers are invisible to sisters.
We're gonna
When women, okay, hold on.
We're gonna get
All
into
right.
that. We're gonna get into
Okay.
that.
All right.
But
I was on a roll.
we gonna get into that. But you just reminded me about Tante Toya, Aunt Toya, and how she raised Dessalines to be the warrior that he was. So in the right environment with the right mindset in the right cultural setting, uh, women, especially black women, can pour into young boys and help them raise up to be uh, admirable men who can defend themselves and their people. And of course, you want to surround them with manhood, but with the right mindset, a woman can guide a boy into the right path. So
Mm-hmm.
now that leads me into, he talked about feminism and how feminism affected black women. I know we talked about this, so we don't have to spend too much time on it. But how did feminism and welfare affect the black woman in the black home? So Pat, how did feminism and welfare affect the black woman in the black home?
Excuse me.
Um, like you said, we've had shows where we went over that, and PC is a lot more skilled at being succinct when it comes to topics like this. I get long winded, and we'll be 20 minutes in, and I'll be like, and to summarize, uh, but I think, um, to the question, how did feminism affect black women?
Negatively
Uh,
affect black women in the black home. Yeah.
I think it allowed it first started this narrative, because I do agree with Umar. Feminism comes in waves, and I'm sure most of us know by now the suffrage
Mm-hmm.
movement, first, second, third, and now we in the potentially fourth wave.
Mm-hmm.
1974 Combahee River Tree Accord. I love going back to that because it talks about how the idea of the modern era of feminism that continues to be driven forward, um the idea being, if we could liberate the black woman, then we will end racism and the patriarchy. And it's a wonderful theory. It really is. But at its core, what you have coming out of that ideology is the perpetual victimhood that we see so many immature, and I'm using immature for a reason, because we know, and it's even funny, we even got to preface all our statements
Mm-hmm.
by differentiating, because as we saw, and I'm just gonna touch on this real quick, as we saw, even though Umar was quick to lambast all black men, when
Mm-hmm.
they brought up black women, he said, but it's
Said
not all
not
black
all.
women.
Right. Right.
Mm-hmm.
He did.
And there are three brothers right here that don't look. I didn't have any kids out of wedlock. I got 4 kids, and they all been through marriage. You two brothers don't have no kids, and we've all mentored and taken care of other people's kids. But
Mm-hmm.
we're never differentiated when they start talking about how men ain't shit.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways, but that's
We have
that's
to,
that's my tap.
but no, but as black people, we got to stop doing that shit. We have to stop doing that. It's not helping. If you can't have an adult conversation and put things on the table and sort things out without having to, do stuff like that. Well, not all black people or all black men. If you can't have a conversation and be honest, don't come to the table because you are not helping. I just had to say that. Go ahead.
No, you good. And that's my tap. So I think one of the things we're dealing with the ideology that came out of that, to me, and this changes over time. If you had caught me 10 years ago when I first wrote The Chasm, my thinking would have been different. Nowadays, my thinking is that one of the biggest negative impacts of that is the victim mentality that emerged.
Mm-hmm.
The perpetual state of woe is me that has been paired with men that have also been raised underneath this umbrella of woe is me victimhood, who have now initiated gold medal efforts in the victim Olympics. I mean, I'm talking about salvos of woe is me missiles launched in the war of victimhood. And we can go on and on and on about how bad it's been. Like, again, we can't even have this conversation in earnest in public, because inevitably somebody is going to feel like you're trying to out victim me, and you can't do that, because what about this, and what about that, and
Yeah,
what about her, and what about him, and what about them, and what about they, and they make it into a whole hip-hop song.
and it's not
um
helping.
so I think without a doubt that has been the biggest uh negative to come out of the ideology of the current wave of feminism, and all of that stems from a lack of accountability. And you hear women saying men aren't accountable, and women saying men aren't accountable, or men saying women aren't accountable. And that whole conversation is interesting to me, because if we're being honest about the conversation, most of the times that I've had it, women say, when did men stop being men? When did men stop taking accountability for their actions? Which is an interesting thing to say, right? Because it supposes that taking accountability is a masculine trait that women don't have to do. It's
It's a
very
human trait.
interesting.
It's an adult trait.
It is. And again, we know that mature women understand that, and they do take accountability. But when we're listening to these conversations, that is, Joe, you and I were a part of a text group, a chat group, where this conversation was coming from a woman, and she was saying, when did men become these types of men that don't take accountability and responsibility? And it's like, what?
Man,
Wait a minute. So that's only a man thing. So
but
it speaks to what I'm speaking to,
well,
and
but
with
by
that, I
yeah,
yield.
but by the end of that conversation, she totally contradicted herself. So yeah,
That's
Absolutely.
about right.
yeah.
That's about right.
So
That
to
was
further
sign
that,
language.
right. So to further that, PC, he talked about the impact of Cosmo with Sue Ellen Browder
So I'm brother. Yeah.
and the lady Brown and the other lady Brown, who it was her idea, and Sue Ellen Browder was the main proponent of it. Then he also talked about Gloria Steinem. So I showed the video about Sue Ellen Browder here on this channel. I did when I was doing a review of Dr. Welson's book. So go check that out. But also he talked about Gloria Steinem. You know, we talked about Gloria Steinem here on the breakdown weeks ago. So from the standpoint of, he's saying that Cosmo was a factor, uh, Gloria Steinem and white women in the feminist movement infiltrating black women. They turned black women against black men, and then he did say black men became the scapegoat.
Okay.
So, in saying that, and your ideas, how do you think feminism affected the way that a lot of black men look at black women as victims?
Wait, say it again.
How do you think feminism affected the way well, I'm not gonna say a lot of black men, but some black men look at black women as victims?
A lot of these black men grew up with mothers who practiced this new wave of feminism. So a lot of times those young men became son husbands because they were the ones, they had to become the man of the house. So they also looked at their mothers from a perspective of, she's always going to need my support. She's always going to need my help. I mean, look at the situation that just happened in Chicago a few days ago. You know what I'm saying? That's similar to that whole, that's like a visual of that whole dynamic. We all, and I grew up in that era, and my mother was a very feminine woman, but at the same time, it was always, I got to rescue mom. I got to make sure mom is taken care of. Mom had it hard. My daddy ain't this. My father ain't that. And, you know, and when you look at it from that perspective, you know, that becomes the culture. The culture is always going to be, no matter what, mom can't do no wrong. I mean, you listen to Tupac and he's talking about dear mama, and even though you was a crack fiend mama, oh, we saw you as a black queen mama, you know. So we always had the perspective that even when she messed up, it wasn't her fault. And I think that is a very damaging and very dangerous way to to raise a man, a boy, from going from a boy to a man. Because you talk about the choices the women had, and Umar talked about the fact that women had poor choices. As men, you go looking for women to help fix. You go looking for women who are damsels in distress. You go looking for women who need your help when you're raised in that particular way. And so if you're looking to rescue that woman and she's not looking to be rescued, you know what I'm saying? Y'all both might mess around and drown in that particular situation. So, you know, I think that it's a very um, interesting dynamic we find ourselves in, because it's a cycle that has to be broken at some point. And you can't break the cycle if you only want to fix one part of the cycle. If you only want to, because you want to talk about the systemic, then you're talking about the fact that we're still at war, or war still being declared on us, which is true. Then we have to look at all the different angles and aspects that war being being declared on us, and we got to stop pretending that black men aren't, you know, targeted in this war as well. Not to say that it's not our responsibility, because as I always say, if somebody's kicking you behind, it's your job to get up and fight back. So I think that it's our job as men to get up and fight back, and it's our job as men to put them in a position where you're going to get hurt if you mess with us, if you touch anybody in our tribe. But we can't do that if we're getting up and we're getting our ass whooped by our women too. And that's something that needs to be said, man. And I know a lot of people take it to heart, but I mean, if we're going to look at the situation, you, I'm gonna stop right there.
I'm just say this before we go any further. This, once again, this channel isn't for everybody. If you're not about having the tough conversations, to put things on the table, to get to the real truth, this channel might not be for you. You know, and it's okay. It's okay to disagree. It's okay to disagree, but this channel may not be for everybody who may not really want truth.
I mean,
Go
just
ahead.
last week, just for that, but just 2 weeks ago, we talked about living in an era of weak men. So we can hold the men
Right.
together. I'm not from that. I'm not cut from that cloth that says men only can talk to men and women only can talk to women. I think if we're adults, adults can talk to adults, and that's it.
Well, I think PC just spoke to a very good point about black people, and this is true men and women. Um, but in this particular era of women, especially these young girls, it rings more true. In terms of the men that a lot of these boys uh, the men that a lot of these boys are going to grow into. In the older generations, you know, I think it was more balanced. But the need to rescue somebody,
Mm-hmm.
that, you know, like that's something that is ingrained into our culture. I struggled with that. Um, as a man, you want to be needed. And the best way to be needed is to find somebody that needs rescuing. Um, and that's kind of how we're trained and groomed, is to to go rescue somebody. The white knight on the horse got to fight a whole dragon for this chick chilling in the castle, watching me get my biscuits burnt. You know what I'm saying? You know, the toughest decision she got to make is which side of her head she gonna let her hair down on. Um, but I gotta climb the motherfucking tower while fighting the dragon. So you know what I'm saying? And then all I get out of that nowadays is a lady that's gonna say that her looking good is my inspiration. So I think that's something that we really got to deal with, to go to the point that PC made with regards to the situation that just happened. And I'm reading through the comments. This is something I was talking to you about, Joe, before the show started. Um, well, we were starting to talk about it. Having that conversation with my boys. Look, if you are raising your son to think that it is his job to lay down his life for your old ass as they parent, I don't give a damn, mother or father. In my opinion, you're fucking up. It is never a child's job to lay down their life for their parent. Look, in my household, first bullet is coming to me. If the second bullet don't hit my wife, me and her got smoke. I'm coming back from the dead for it. My children should not die so that their parent. That's the complete reversal of the purpose of a parent.
Mm-hmm.
But we not even thinking about it like that. You mean to tell me that you went through all of this to raise a great son, to watch him throw his life away for you? We ain't even got to add nothing else to that. Not your pride, not your ego. There's nothing else you could put on the end of that. For you, your child is expected to throw themselves away for you. If that's your mentality, you're unfit to be a parent. If you've raised children like that, you fucked up somewhere. And that is so serious to me. No child, no son should feel any sort of obligation to put themselves at risk for either one of their parents or their grandparents either, especially. But you got all these young boys, you 17, 18 years old, time that I'll shoot somebody in the head for my 96-year-old grandma. What the fuck is wrong with you? Does that make sense? How does that make sense? Where's the logic in that? These are legitimate questions because I'm struggling. I know I'm off topic, but I'm like, where does that make sense to people that they're saying, man, I wish even at 15, somebody could have got to work for my mom. How old was your mom when you was 15? She was 35. You were gonna throw away all of your life at 15 for your 35-year-old mother? That's not love. That's damage.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think a lot of the mentality or the people who hold that mentality come from the Pookies and the Ray Rays, who may be the children of the Pookies and the Ray Rays, because the Pookies and the Ray Rays had that situation. Since I brought it up, we might as well go ahead and get into it. Right? That's one thing that was brought up. So one thing that Umar said that I vehemently disagree with is he basically said Pookies and Ray Ray shouldn't exist. So undesirable black men should not exist. In an ideal world, yes, undesirable men or undesirable people, period, would not exist in an ideal world. But my question, name me the society anywhere in history that did not have undesirable people and or more specifically undesirable men. Name it. Name me somebody in the comments, name me the society, name me the period of time where there was a society where there were no undesirable people at all. Undesirables exist. The key is to make sure that they are not a large part of the population. I think that's one of the issues that we have is there may be more undesirable men than we want to, or there's a narrative about more undesirable men than there should be. I'm leaning more toward the narrative. Do I think that we have a little too many? Yeah, but I think it's not as many, because looking at different statistics and stuff, I don't think it's as many undesirable men as we've been led to believe throughout our lifetimes. So we also talked about the undesirable black men who get into relationships with black women who create the mad black women, and the gentleman countered with, well, a lot of those women ignore the good black men, and then Umar
Well,
basically
hold
went
on, Joe. Hold on. You cross pollinating right now, bro. Now they sound the same, but those is different. You gotta give us a chance to respond to what you just said.
I'm trying to put it together, man.
No, because I told you should have just played the clip, because them was two different things. I know we getting long.
Man, just say it, damn it.
All right, I'm doing this for PC.
Say it, damn it.
No, it's absolutely narrative driven.
Yeah.
There's no more black men that are quote unquote Pookies and Ray Rays than there are in any other community. So the question becomes, how are we defining what's an appropriate ratio? Is it comparatively speaking? Because if it's comparatively speaking, then we're doing okay. But if we're deciding that we want to make our own arbitrary metric about what's a good amount of Pookies and Ray Rays for us based on what we think is good, well, that's a separate conversation that requires some follow-up research and studies to be done to figure out what's the best way of figuring out the proper number of Pookies and Ray Rays for proper efficiency and maintenance of the relationship dating market, because Pookies and Ray Rays do serve a purpose. Like, let's be clear about this. Pookies and Ray Rays serve the purpose of removing the pussy holes from the segmented population of women that good men have to pick from. See, the goal of a Pookie and a Ray Ray is to remove undesirable females from the desirable female population. Their goal is also to leave signs and remnants of past erroneous thinking for those men who are looking for a specific type of woman. And that might hurt to say, but the truth is, if at any point in time you found yourself with a Pookie or a Ray Ray or a Kanisha or whatever the black woman equivalent to a Pookie and a Ray Ray is,
Pookie
that
shit.
says something about where your mentality was at that moment. Your past matters. The people that you're dealing with now absolutely have a right to determine how much they want to deal with you based on the scars that you have from those people that you dealt with previously. Pookies and Ray Rays serve a purpose, but we can't shit. It's absolutely stupid of Umar to say that there should be no Pookies and Ray Rays. That's absolute idiocy at its finest. And with that, I yield the mic.